It is election season here in South Africa. Now, with just 43 days to go to this year's national and provincial elections on the 29th of May, new political parties are, of course, gearing up for a David versus Goliath poll battle, if you will. Now, addressing the high unemployment rate and the energy crisis are just some of the priorities for the new parties as well. But can they keep their promises in what will undoubtedly be one of the most hotly contested elections since 1994? And as part of our series here on Morning Live, focusing on the role of new and small political parties, this morning we take a closer one, that is, at what some of the political parties stand for. And joining us for the first edition this morning, we will have Mmusi Maimane, the leader of Build One South Africa. Songezo Zibi is the leader of RISE Mzansi, and Dr Senathi Fisha, who's president of the All Citizens Party. But before we speak to the leaders, we just quickly want to take a look at what it is that they promised the electorate. And we start with BOSA and, of course, their priorities. So what they are saying to the citizens is that this is what they will focus on. So keeping the lights on, combating South Africa's energy crisis, reforming education for jobs, building a capable state for jobs, growing the economy for jobs, and gender-based violence. So quite an emphasis on job creation, which is, of course, pivotal in this country. And then we move on to RISE Mzansi and take a look at their priority areas, some of them. So RISE will look at leadership and governance, safety and the rule of law, the economy and jobs, individual, family and community well-being, and, of course, the climate crisis. And then the All Citizens Party, and this is what their focus is likely to center on. So they are promising the South African electorate 3 million sustainable and quality jobs, powers to traditional leaders, Operation Buyelekaya for illegal immigrants, also transformation of the judiciary and tax reforms to alleviate poverty. So this is, in summary, just what some of these parties are offering the electorate. So this is where we ask you to tell us in our question of the day, of course, what exactly you are likely to take from these parties and their vote. Will you lend your vote to them in these upcoming elections? I'm going to take a walk across now whilst you mull over that, just to walk over to the set where the political parties are. Morning, Leanne. And just coming across here to speak to the leaders. Gentlemen, lady, good morning, and thank you for coming through to Morning Live.
Good morning and thanks for having us.
Let me start with RISE Mzansi. So, of all those priority areas, which do you believe is going to be the absolute key for you as a party?
So I think when you consider that most of the problems we have are brought about by poor leadership, bad governance and corruption, I think it becomes quite clear that if we do not solve that problem, it becomes nearly impossible to implement any of the policies that we or any other political party may come up with. So I think it begins with electing the right people, reforming institutions, having the right people in the right roles within national, provincial and local government, and cleaning up the governance so that the money is not stolen, the money is not wasted, and is directed towards the right things on time so that the South African people can begin to feel the effect of having a democratic government. So I think that's absolutely key. It's not to say the others are not important, but it's really important to understand what is going to move the needle.
Indeed. So, All Citizens Party, Dr. Fisha, in terms of what will be key for you?
What is key for me is that South Africa should be ready for a woman leadership. That is where it starts. So we must be ready to elect a woman leadership, because for more than 300 years, since 1652, we have failed to make any meaningful difference. Our men have failed. And I am expecting that in these coming elections, all South Africans should rally behind a woman president so that we can see the changes. If you look at all these years, we have actually moved from zero. Now we are worse than ever before, minus maybe 100 where we are at this moment. Our people are suffering, and people have been just being rhetoric all the time. and they've not managed to do any changes. So I'm ready to lead South Africa.
So you say a woman will make all the difference.
All the differences.
All right, Mmusi Maimane, Build One South Africa, what's going to be key for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this election is about change, right? It's about change from the old. It's not even big versus small. It's about old versus new. And the new post-2024 must be a priority on how we create an economy that puts a job in every home. We live in 2 South Africas. Too many households don't have a single person working, 40% of them, which means that children are waking up every day to watch no one go to work. That's not a South Africa we want to do. We want to build. And secondly, we've got to ensure that we fix our education system. This government currently, as it sits at the moment, is delivering a different version of Bantu education. And frankly, I think that if we do not skill our young people to make sure that they not only can compete with anyone in the world in terms of workforce readiness, skills, literacy, we are going to end up in a scenario when our young people are not just unemployed, but they're unemployable. So it's a function of ensuring that when you build the capability of government, that we cannot govern in the same way as what we have been in the last 30 years. It has to be a change so that we prepare South Africa for its future and to achieve what this government has failed, which is to actually build one South Africa. A South Africa where, whether you are born in El Dorado Park or in Soweto or in Sandton, your educational inputs are the same, your opportunities to be able to access the economy are the same. And if we achieve that, then we can ultimately build a South Africa we can all bequeath to the next generation.
So the question arising from that is whether you can build that South Africa under the current electoral system.
Well, that's why we took the government to court to amend the Electoral Act, right, and succeeded at that. The electoral system is built in the first instance to hold politicians accountable. And that's why I'm fighting for a constituency-based model where politicians are working in communities so that the things that are prescribed in the national constitution about healthcare, education and safety, someone must be held accountable. If you are living in a town and the school is not there, you can't ask your ward councillor, that's not their job. You've got to ask the member of parliament or the member of the provincial legislature. That's how the law is structured. But further than that, we've got to ensure that as we go into this new election cycle, the change that we need not only must enhance accountability, but must improve governance in our streets, in our communities, so that our streets are much safer. That's why I want politicians back on the road working with people rather than this 5-year cycle where they come in, make a number of promises, then disappear for 5 years, whilst in fact Parliament gives them a constituency-based period so that they can go spend time in communities.
Right, and there you have it, opening salvos there from Build One South Africa, All Citizens Party and RISE Mzansi. We're going to take a quick break here on Morning Live, and then we'll delve into some of the nitty-gritties in terms of the promises, the aspirations that these parties have for South Africa and, of course, its prosperity. Well, welcome back. And, of course, different views have emerged since the IEC announced it would lodge an urgent and direct appeal to the Constitutional Court against the Electoral Court's decision to set aside the Commission's decision to remove MK leader, former South African President Jacob Zuma from the MK party's election list. But, of course, that is something that's going to come in discussion with Leanne later on. But right now, we're focusing on a new feature that we have for this week here on Morning Live. With just 43 days to go to this year's national and provincial elections, we are focusing in on the smaller parties, just to give them a voice and obviously to help you make an informed decision when you actually go to cast your ballot. And we're joined this morning by Songezo Zibi of RISE Mzansi. We have Dr Fisha from All Citizens Party, and from Build One South Africa, Mmusi Maimane. So let's get into, I want to go to the bread and butter issues. You know, Mmusi, you mentioned something about children waking up to no one going to work. People don't have jobs in this country. So that is, of course, a very key issue. If you look at our unemployment rate, and if, especially by the extended definition in this country, it is at crisis levels. Mm-hmm. You cannot have the majority of your youth in the country sitting unemployed. But there's the issue of poverty, of course. Poverty, unemployment, and inequality. This triple axis of evil has been with us for the longest time, since the dawn of democracy. So how does RISE Mzansi intend on addressing this matter?
So, Sakina, our overarching message for this election and into the future is that we need new leaders. Because the reason leadership is important for all of these issues, that it determines how the people in power understand and perceive the problems that we have. So, for instance, all of us talk about jobs because they're really important. There are two very urgent needs in South Africa that many of us do not even think about. The first is that people do not have enough food. Most homes, people have one meal, they have 2 meals if they are lucky, but generally people go without enough food. The second is that what we saw in Bryanston and Hyde Park and all of these areas a few weeks ago is a daily feature for millions of South Africans, and that is not having water at all. What difference does leadership make therefore is understanding what is urgent and how to intervene in order to alleviate the problem in the short term and then work on improvements in the longer term. So that is why both leadership and things like food and water are absolute priorities for RISE Mzansi.
So once you have the right leaders in position, according to you, how do they go about that business? Where do they start?
So the first thing that I said is that you've got to identify the problem. What we don't have enough of is direct interventions to put food on the table in the short term for South Africa.
So what are those interventions?
If you don't qualify for social grants, so we need to be able to have food vouchers for people that actually cannot afford food. We need to have a SASSA-related food discount system for people who go and buy foodstuffs at major retail stores in particular. We need to make sure that a lot more communities have access to water, even if it's on an emergency level, because food and water are the most critical things to any person's life. But most importantly, because a lot of these services are provided by municipalities, we believe that first order of business is to put as many of these dysfunctional municipalities under administration, so that the water and these things can be provided to people. Otherwise, you have this situation you have now where people go without water for 4 months.
We've had these municipalities under administration and they come back and there's no difference. In fact, in some instances, they are worse now than before they were.
Imagine if we don't put them under administration. What then happens? Does it get better?
I mean, let me just, when I was in Parliament, part of this issue of dealing with poverty, when you looked at the ANC benches, they kind of discussed it as a nice electioneering thing. Actually, the process of lawmaking requires us to be intentional about some of the things that we've got to do. And one of the crucial things that because when is a child actually hungry? In the first 1,000 days, if we don't address that maternal and the first 1,000 days, that child is born stunted. We actually mean that child's economic potential is reduced, which means they join the track of poverty and remain in it forever. It's why I've been very intentional about if we're going to keep a child grant, it needs to begin whilst the woman is pregnant. Because then that way, no mother who's pregnant gets to go to bed hungry and their child in utero is also hungry.
Okay, so you invoke something that happened in your past. So you speak about when you were in Parliament and you were the leader of the official opposition. So at that time, the Western Cape being run by your party at the time, what did you do intentionally as the Democratic Alliance to make sure that children didn't go hungry and there was no stunted growth of children in the Western Cape?
Well, I think it's important to realize that part of the capability of government, and I'm careful not to speak about the DA because they can defend their own record. But one of the things I fought for was we have an indigent policy in this country that targets homes where South Africans who are poor can get free basic services, where those are water and electricity, that we can ensure that the delivery of food, etc., goes into that. So we were very intentional about that data management and we intervened deliberately. When I left Parliament and went into private service, during the COVID era, we were able to distribute over 1.1 million meals without any of the political rhetoric because we were intentional about delivering to people. I'm very passionate about education because if you don't create a pathway for a child to be able to move out of poverty through an educational system. That's why we introduced blended learning as a center that we built. It was intentional. So none of this is about promising to do this, promising to do that. I've actually practically worked and done it, literally in communities, even outside of government. And the point I'm trying to make, more crucially, is that there's a dynamic upon which you bring the experience of the successes and the failures in politics, but also having worked in business, having worked in communities, to actually see what it takes to, in fact, eventually do put a job in that home. And lastly, when we look at this whole educational thing, part of the kids going to school isn't just so that they can, go through textbooks, etc. It's also so that we can ensure that all the meal programs, what happened in KZN is an absolute crime when during COVID, the government failed to in fact deliver meals to those kids. Our interventions in poverty must be able to say to ourselves, we do the welfare bit, but furthermore, we also do the developmental part of making sure kids pass better, they move from 30% to 50%, we ensure that the skills levels is increased so that they have an access to a job in that home. It's crucial.
Dr. Fisha, you promised 3 million jobs.
Yeah, no, I think let us just stop making South Africans dependent. We must create a community that is able to be independent. They must go to work and sweat and get salaries, meaningful salaries and sustainable jobs. Right now, the All Citizens Party, we are promising to give 3 million jobs in 6 months.
Where? How?
In 6 months. Whilst other parties are talking about 3 million jobs in 5 years, I have had enough. And I believe that with my plan, this is going to be possible.
How? How are you going to create 3 million jobs in 6 months?
Look, there's a lot of jobs available around the country. And the people that have been in power, my colleague here, he has been in power. He was given that power to make changes. He was the leader of one of the biggest political parties in this country. But the changes that happened there, we can see them. And I am saying we are going to industrialize South Africa. We have already started. If I can tell you, we have already identified a community in Hammanskraal. We have opened a textile manufacturing firm, which is run by the most forgotten people, the blind people. These things are done by blind people. Who has ever thought that a blind person can actually make a t-shirt, can actually make a cap? We have started doing that. And we are also, as the All Citizens Party, we are thinking that when we industrialize South Africa, we must bring in artificial intelligence, fourth industrial revolution, because it is said in the statistic that in the coming 5 years we will have 100 million jobs created by AI, robotics, making robots and making South Africa to be alive and then have jobs. People must make laptops, IT must be booming in South Africa.
But I put it to you, you're not going to create 3 million jobs in 6 months.
Put me on a test. I want South Africans to put me on a test. I've been creating jobs for people.
How many jobs did that textile firm that you are speaking about create?
No, the textile, it was just a try to say, can we do something like this? Let me give you another example. Right now in South Africa, we are assembling parts. We order parts and we assemble cars in South Africa instead of making parts, making cars. That is another job industry. And making cars in South Africa. Right now we are happy to import cars like Haval from China, and then we are happy to have those cars, German cars, and then South Africa has got nothing to do.
Yeah, but we don't have a car here.
Yes.
But I'll tell you what, we're going to come back to all of this.
I want you to know that I'm not dreaming And I want to tell you that let South Africans give me that opportunity. I've got a whole lot of things.
Okay.
We have won the provinces.
All right, we're going to come back.
Yes.
We're going to come back. Dr. Fisha, she says, please, she's not dreaming. Give her a chance. As are the other two gentlemen with us this morning, Mmusi Maimane and, of course, Songezo Zibi. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back, continuing this conversation with our three parties and asking them why you should vote for them. And welcome back. Of course, 43 days to go to this year's national and provincial elections on the 29th of May. And joining us this morning, we have three parties who will be on the ballot and vying for your votes. We've got RISE Mzansi, we've got the All Citizens Party, and Build One South Africa, represented by Mmusi Maimane, Dr. Fisha, and of course Songezo Zibi, respectively. All right, let's take a look at some of your questions right now for some of the leaders here this morning. So this one's from Kosikona, who asked, and this is for the All Citizens Party, will they participate in all provinces for the national election? Dr. Fisher?
Yes, we on our own have qualified for 5 provinces and national. And 3 days ago, we united with alliances, about 7 of them, from different political parties, and now we have covered South Africa. So that's the reason why we feel that will make a meaningful difference in this South Africa.
All right. Let's move on to Build One South Africa. Mmusi Maimane, which party or grouping will his party form coalitions with if there's no outright majority, given that the moonshot is disastrous and MK-EFF coalition will not match values or vision of his party?
Yeah, and I think, again, I have to emphasize the fact that in 2016, I was able to work with coalitions that began to see living standards in South Africa improve in municipalities. We were able to bring upon a number of parties that work together towards, in fact, when you think about Johannesburg, when you think about, Tshwane and Ekurhuleni and Gqeberha, you begin to see the majority of local government budget being in the hands of the opposition. Now, I say that because it takes that experience to be able to go what worked and what didn't work. And the things that in fact work are you have to predicate any coalition agreement with a plan for how you are going to do things. We need a plan for education. We need a plan for jobs. We need a plan to keep the lights on. And we've tabled a 10-point plan as Build One South Africa. I'm not going to coalesce with people who are wanting to steal people's money. I'm not going to coalesce with people who think that 30% pass mark is fine. I'm not going to coalesce with people who think that Eskom should remain in the state that it is, or Transnet, who are not going to work with decentralizing the police to bring it down. So predicated on that plan, then we can make a decision about who we work with. But if you simply just get together for the sake of saying you want to change the government, you end up with a mess that's going on now in Joburg, where you ultimately keep a revolving door and you see what's happening in Ekurhuleni. So for me, it's about that plan and ensuring that you continuously communicate to voters how you are working against that plan.
I'm going to come back for a more pointed question on that. But here's RISE Mzansi's question, Songezo Zibi. This one, I'm not seeing the name there at the top, but it says, I know and see that political parties are campaigning, moving around like hungry hyenas, looking for prey and promising people the world of broken promises in their manifesto launches. So my question is, what makes your party different from other political parties?
Because we are built from the ground up. We are built around the concept of constant citizen participation, identifying specific problems that affect families and affect communities and affect individuals, and making them the center of daily politics, whether there is an election or not. Our organizing model is built around tackling issues every day. And the second fundamental difference is that means while most political parties will disappear after the election, our organizing and presence in communities will accelerate after this coming election, because we have 2026 to look forward to, we've got 2029 to look forward to. The reason we're doing it this way is that people have lost faith in politics, have lost faith in politicians, and have lost faith in political parties. And what we need to do for this democracy to work for everyone is to make sure we return that faith, and that faith can only be restored if there is constant presence and citizen participation. And that is what RISE Mzansi is about.
So let's get to that coalition question. Who are you willing to go into coalition with, and who is an absolute no?
So we will go into a coalition with anyone who is not married to the idea of corruption, and specifically that in order to get into a coalition with you, certain senior figures and their acolytes must be protected from prosecution, they must not be arrested, and so on. So that is the first thing. The second thing is anyone who agrees that we need some political and institutional reforms. The political reforms are changing the electoral system, changing how the government works, making government information more transparent, and so on.
But let's get real for all of us.
That would then disqualify certain parties.
Yes.
Such as the African National Congress, because I can guarantee you they are not going to exclude our current president and his deputy president and Gwede Mantashe and so on. All of these guys that are tainted by different corruption scandals, because the quid pro quo for getting into an arrangement with the ANC is that you've got to protect certain senior people from corruption. And corruption has brought this country into its knees.
So the ANC is a no-no for RISE Mzansi.
The ANC clearly would have difficulty with meeting our conditions, but we'll give them an opportunity, Sakina. They might surprise us, but I don't think so.
All right. Dr. Fisha, quickly for you, who would you go into a coalition with? Who would you not?
Look, from the old parties, the All Citizens Party wouldn't really prefer to go with any one of them because they are untransformed. But however, because our goal is to have a woman president, if the men in these different parties are willing to hand over the power to a woman, the All Citizens Party will not choose which one we are going with. Any party that is willing to give us the power as the All Citizens Party to be in the forefront so that we can make the changes, we are willing to go with them.
So
but
another party that has orange, Patricia de Lille's party, and she's a woman. NFP. Would you go into a coalition with them?
If that is going to make us a president.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I've already made my conditions quite clear in terms of, here's a 10-point plan.
No, but give us the parties. Who are a go and who are not?
Naturally, the corrupt cannot participate in that. That's the ANC.
Who are the corrupt?
The ANC is corrupt, clearly. I mean, that's their theme. That's their organizing mission. But I also do think that we must not lose track of betraying ourselves when we say we want to build one South Africa. One of my deep concerns is that I'm seeing more and more parties mobilize on the basis of race. Or rather, this idea that you should have black parties, white parties, Indian parties, colored parties, or some. So it's a challenging question for me, and I will put it to each of those parties to say, we cannot be regressing back to tribalism or any. We've got to be centered around this particular plan for the progress of our people.
Okay. ANC is a no, DA?
The challenge that I would put to the DA is that if the DA wants to hold on to being a minority party and a party that just only has those interests, which is why in many ways we're to leave, I'm not going to put up with that because it has other different problems. Corruption isn't the only disqualifier. It's the fact that you can also perpetuate inequality by simply saying we focus government only on delivering here and ignoring there. And that cannot be a South Africa that builds one South Africa. When we want to talk about building one South Africa, it's parties that say, I'm not here to represent just sectarian, tribal interests. I'm here to represent all South Africans. And I will put the same challenge to the DA, I'd put the same challenge to the IFP, I'd put the same challenge to anybody. Because these things are important if we're going to write the next story of South Africa.
All right. And you are, of course, watching Morning Live, and we're speaking to some of the parties who will, for the first time, be trying to garner seats in the National Assembly. And, of course, they are here to tell you exactly what their vision is for South Africa and maybe help you make up your mind. Let's take a quick break. And welcome back. So much to talk about, so little time. As cliched as that may be, it is the reality. Speaking to three political parties this morning, and of course, they are making their maiden foray into our national and provincial elections this year, 2024, which of course will take place on the 29th of May. We've got Songezo Zibi, he's with RISE Mzansi. Then we've got Dr. Fisha from the All Citizens Party and Mmusi Maimane representing Build One South South Africa. So let me quickly get into the issue of immigration. This is a big one for South Africans, and many people concerned about this for various reasons, and it's been characterized differently depending on who you speak to. So as RISE Mzansi, let's talk about your views and your proposals on this.
We have a broken immigration system. It is corrupt, and physically our borders are extremely porous, and this is one of the reasons we were grey listed by the FATF last year or year before last, because we practically don't know who comes in and out. That becomes a security risk, and also causes other problems within the country. We've got common sense solutions. The first is that we need to secure the immigration system and the borders, because sometimes we deport people and they come back the very next week. So we need to ensure that. The second thing is clean out the corruption at Home Affairs and the police, because it is through those corrupt networks that you get this. Thirdly, document everybody who's in the country who's undocumented, and they need to apply for the right papers. Those who qualify for the right papers stay. Those who don't qualify for the right papers must go and reapply from the country from which they came. And we think that these are just common sense solutions, because the ultimate problems are corruption, and it is a failure to apply the law, including some employment practices by some employers who want to exploit the vulnerability, in particular of undocumented migrants, and pay them subpar wages.
Dr. Fisha?
Yeah, my view is that the immigration problem has got two solutions. The first one is that we do have Immigration Act, which must be followed, which has stipulated clearly what to do and what not to do. And I fail to understand why our executive does not follow the legal way of managing immigration. If there is a criteria that says an illegal immigrant is like this and like this, and this is what steps must be taken, the executive must enforce that. There is no law enforcement in this country. And my view is that the other responsibility, the second part, is that the law is very clear about people that employ illegal foreigners. And in my view is that those people are supposed to be arrested. So that's where we should start. Let's start by arresting people who are taking people and encouraging them to work without papers. So for me, the basis lies with law enforcement at the borders, in our homes, and everywhere else on the street. So once South Africa, we can have a sitting government like All Citizens Party, emphasizing on that, and decisive government, which does not feel that is making anybody's favor. I think that is when we can start winning the issue of illegal immigration.
Mmusi Maimane?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you got to legalize and regulate. The legalized part is to make sure everybody's got appropriate documentation. I think no one can disagree with that, and enforce your laws. But when I talk about regulation, part of the issue is that if there's a spaza shop in the township, make sure it's running the right laws, it's operating on the right standards. But the other 2 points I want to make, which I don't think should be missed, is that immigration in this country, in many ways, the pain that citizens are feeling is actually the more African conversation and the bordering and neighboring countries. And I think we need to have a special conversation on that. Because here we are allowing President Ramaphosa to go and endorse an illegal election in Zimbabwe and then say to Mnangagwa, you have been elected in a fraudulent election. And then we get worried when suddenly Zimbabweans flock into the country because we failed to do what we stand for as a principle, which is to fight for democratic rights in Zimbabwe. I fought in Zambia for the same, in Malawi, because if you don't do that, actually the immigrants that come from those countries, many of them actually want to remain in their countries. They want to thrive in their countries. So let's fix for that so that we can ensure. And then lastly, when you talk about regulation and visa adjudication, it's important because we mustn't just see immigration as this threat. We must see it equally so as skill sharing. And if you employ someone who comes from another country, be clear, we're going to increase the tax rate in which they are taxed so that we can ensure that there's parity. But also intra-trade in the region is going to be important. We've only got 60 million people. We've got to trade in Africa in a 1.4 billion people by 2040.
So we've got A minute. So let's give you each 20 seconds. Why should people vote for you?
It is time for new leaders. It is time for younger leaders, more energetic, with a new vision. With a new vision. And I think that's what RISE Mzansi places on the table, in the quality of the leadership that we have, in the thoughtfulness of the policies that we have, and in our belief that we need to deepen this democracy through active participation of citizens in parliamentary and legislative processes, which is what our constitution promises.
I think the All Citizens Party is ready to govern, and I'm appealing to all South Africans to go and vote right, irrespective of their affiliation with any other party. Let them try the All Citizens Party and the leader, Dr Senathi Fisha, to give them the real change that they have been waiting for.
I think for me, it's about the experience that we've shown to be able to bring a job in every home. If you want to stop Bantu education, which is what this government wants, let's vote for change. And I'm saying BOSA will improve the educational outcomes of many South Africans. And then I think in closing, I want to leave South Africans with this thought. You know, in '94, you couldn't find a single person who voted for the National Party. They denied it afterwards. Soon, in 2029, we'll be finding people who are saying, I never voted for the ANC. Let our votes reflect the hopes of our children rather than looking backwards. Let's focus on ensuring that we build this South Africa for our future.
Well, Mmusi Maimane, Dr. Fisha, and of course Songezo Zibi, thank you so much for speaking to us this morning, representing some of the smaller parties in this year's election. Build One South Africa, All Citizens Party, and RISE Mzansi. Well, you will make up your mind, and we're helping you with that decision.